we've had authors, we've had doctors, we've had rocket scientists. The rocket scientist also was a matchbook maker, by the way. We've had other people, Air Force officers, we've had bomber pilots, we've had everybody. We have not yet had a lawyer, though, so I don't know what that means. We're here to hear Sue Skambis, eloquent resident council chair, and if you haven't seen her lately, she's been off taking elocution lessons to get ready for the great play she's going to participate in. She has promised to speak under 2 hours, and she will not give a closed book exam. Thank you. And with that, I give you Sue Skambis.
Thank you. It is great to see all of you. People have said all day, are you nervous, are you nervous? And I said, no, because it's my best friends are all right here. And a special hello to Marilyn Goodman, who had surgery yesterday, and there she is in a wheelchair because she is a good friend. I'm going to tell you about my lucky life. I have been fortunate so many times, and I will tell you some examples along the way, but there will be at least 100 or 1,000 that I don't get to today. But good luck seems to follow me around, and I feel very, very fortunate. I'm going to tell you the history of my life in a series of stories. I hope you will find them entertaining. I will be looking for snoring going on and hope I don't see any. And I'm going to take a line from one of the NBC News anchors to say, thank you for the privilege of your time that you have come today. I'm very grateful. So in the beginning, it all started with Jerry and Joanne, high school sweethearts in Battle Creek, Michigan. After graduating from Michigan State University, they each took a job in the agriculture college at Michigan State. Mom fed the chickens and collected the eggs, and Dad was the assistant swineherd, so you can imagine what he did. They were living in a farmhouse on the agriculture campus when I was born, and we lived there for some months or so, and that was my lovely baby picture and what I looked like at 3. What happens to you over time, I don't know. The first example of good fortune for me happened while we were living in Lansing, which is where Michigan State University is. Mother was driving in a car on Icy Road in downtown Lansing, and she had put both me and the diaper bag on the front seat next to her because this was the time before car seats. And she went around the corner and the passenger door flew open and something went out. When she finished going around the corner, she stopped and looked and discovered it was the diaper bag, not me. So my first good luck, and I was months old at that point. Within months, we moved back to Battle Creek, where my grandparents and aunts and uncles were located, and Mom and Dad worked there. And then, when I turned 6, we moved to Florida. Okay. So here are a few memories about growing up in Florida in the 1960s, and I see a whole lot of heads nodding, so I know you've been through it too. In 1960, Labor Day, Hurricane Donna hit Fort Myers, which is where we had landed. A direct hit, the first big hurricane since the 1920s. And so a lot of building had been going on and ignoring the fact that if you were on the beach, you might get hit with water as well as wind. So that was a direct hit at that point. My memory of it was I was stationed in front of the dining room window with a mop bucket and a sponge, and it was my job to mop up the water that came through the jalousie windows. Remember jalousie windows? You know, thin panels with lots of spaces in between them for water to come through. So that was my job. My memory is that it took about 18 hours for it to go over Fort Myers, which is why in 2004, when Hurricane Charlie went over my house in Orlando in 45 minutes, I didn't believe it was over. I thought we were in the eye and it was going to start blowing again in just a few minutes. But at that point in that storm, that was all it was, a great relief. Another fortunate thing for me. So let's see, I was in elementary school when the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs happened. And we were having drills about duck and cover and hide under your desk, like that was going to be helpful, but you know, at that point we didn't know any better. And fortunately, it all resolved itself. I don't even want to know the politics behind that. And we did not ever have to test out whether duck and cover would work. JFK was assassinated when I was in 6th grade, and that was a milestone for an elementary school student. And then in that same year, 1964, or right after 1964 in the spring, the Beatles came and were on Ed Sullivan, and we were able to get some of those 45 speed records, remember the little ones? And we had a 6th grade teacher that would let us stay after school and practice dancing. So that's how I learned to do the twist. And then we would run home and watch Lloyd Thaxton. Anybody remember Lloyd Thaxton? Okay, he was like American Bandstand. And so all the big kids would be dancing on TV, and you know, we would be mimicking them the next afternoon when we came back to school. She let us stay every day, I'm telling you. Then also, in Florida, NASA was booming, and the Mercury and the Gemini flights were happening. And coming from Fort Myers, that would be your field trip. We would go up to Kennedy Space Center and see the rockets and the launch sites and all that kind of thing. Other kids, other places were going to Washington, D.C. or to St. Augustine, but we were looking at the space stuff because, you know, that was right in our back door. Ready for a laugh? Here's my senior picture. Again, one does mature over time. In high school, there were several things to remember. In 1968, January, the public school teachers in Florida across the entire state went on strike. And at the end of the first week, my parents were very concerned about this, very focused on education, and sent my younger brother to cousins back in Battle Creek, and sent me to cousins that now lived in the Boston area. And so here was my first exposure to the New England world and all the history and everything that's up there from Little Fort Myers, Florida. So this was a very eye-opening experience for me. I had a cousin that took me into Manhattan, and we saw a play, and I rode the subway, and I had lunch at the automat. You know, all kinds of things that you never saw in Fort Myers, Florida. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I will add, because she's not here to defend herself, that this was the first place I was offered marijuana. I looked at that and I said, no, I don't think so. Let's see, much of the activity for after school and in the summer was water skiing on the Caloosahatchee River, which runs right through Fort Myers. We had a houseboat which thought it was a ski boat, and it would pull us, and it was a lot of fun, and I had a lot of good memories from that. The summer between my junior and senior year was the moon landing, and a lot of us got together at our history teacher's house to watch it on the black and white TV that that he had, and that was something I'll always remember. I'm very fortunate to still be in touch with high school classmates. We have a reunion every year, and we met this past Saturday down at the ranch that a pair of our classmates who married each other bought this ranch. And there's still about 25 of us that get together every year, and I'm very fortunate to have that and all those memories with them. My senior year was the first time that our high school in Fort Myers was integrated. First time we had black students on campus, and it was a whole brand new experience for us, a good step toward improving the mixture that occurs in our country and in the world, but that was the first time that any of us had been exposed to those kids that we only saw at football games when their team came and played our team. So another good educational experience for me. And then you all know how I love puzzles and Jeopardy and trivia and stuff like that. Well, it goes back to high school. Do you remember on TV on Sunday afternoons there was something called College Bowl? This, you know, my people, I said that to my daughter, and she's like, what? So that was the first time I had ever heard, oops, I'm not supposed to be moving over there. I had ever heard of some of these college names, like Bowdoin. I had not ever heard of Bowdoin, and things like that. You see, that's what I remember from all of this, and MIT, I mean, what does that stand for? All these things, and so I would watch those, and I was so impressed. Well, by the time our senior year in high school rolled around, we had our second TV station in Fort Myers. We had only one until I was a senior, which is why if you ask me about Star Trek, which was not on our channel that we could see, I have no idea, because that was not part of my growing up. So we had a high school version of College Bowl. It was called High Q, and we were on TV. That was my first TV appearance, serving on the High Q team for North Fort Myers High School, and we came in second. It was in high school that I discovered my love of biology. And like Bill said last time, it all traces back to somebody. Some teacher, some co-worker, some mentor, somebody that catches your interest and gets your spark going for what will lead you along a path for your whole life. And I show you my two sparks here. Phil Woodard was my high school teacher. I had the good fortune, here's another lucky thing, when it came time to pick electives in 8th grade, I didn't pick chorus, I didn't pick band. I had the chance to take a science class. The 9th grade science class that everybody took in 9th grade, biology, they let a few of us take it in 8th grade. And so I took it in 8th grade with Mr. Woodard, who set me on my path for the rest of my life, for sure. With him, I could also take the following year zoology, and then I could take anatomy and physiology. He had a skeleton, and we had to, one that was hanging on a frame, not his personal skeleton. He took us through what was called a bone oral. We had to name every bone and every bump, every protrusion, every indentation on that skeleton. And it was a great learning experience about memorizing and matching a visual cue to a word, so that you weren't just memorizing a list, you were looking at something and saying, oh yeah, that looks like so-and-so, so that's what that is. And we all thought he was horrible. Oh, you know, this is college work, what are you doing to us? But it was, you know, a great training experience, and I'm always grateful for him. Moving on to college in a few minutes, because I wanted to put her picture on the same slide as Mr. Woodard's, was Dr. Margaret Gilbert. She was head of the biology department at Florida Southern, which is where I went. I had the good fortune of being her lab assistant and having my desk in her office for 3.5 years, and she was a wonderful, wonderful role model. This is a picture of us at her retirement, which was in the, let's see, I'm gonna say right about 2000, and I know you don't recognize me there with curly hair. There's a story behind that too, but we're not to it yet. Okay. So we're back in college, and in the summer, rather than going back to the job that I had in high school, which was being a cashier at Moss Brothers Restaurant. Anybody remember Moss Brothers? Yeah. Okay, a few people do. Dad decided that I should find something in biology. So, well, he was right. And so what I found was with the Lee County Mosquito Control District. Lee County, Florida, home of Fort Myers, and also the Thomas Edison home, where he retired, where he had his summer vacation, or winter vacation, and 1,212 square miles of salt marsh and freshwater ponds, okay? We had both saltwater and freshwater species, and this was kind of a fiefdom. This was a politician who had collected all kinds of power and things around him. The Mosquito Control District was based at the Buckingham Airstrip, which had been an airstrip during World War II where they had practiced flying and that kind of thing. And he had fog trucks and helicopters and planes and mosquito collection trucks. Who counts the mosquitoes? My summer job, 3 years. This is what they look like. That's a big metal funnel on the top. They put a gauze bag down here at the end, on the small end, and then they drive for 2 miles and then jump out and close up the bag, having collected anything that was flying in front of the truck while they were doing it, and then put it in a killing bucket, a bucket with a poison strip in it, and then they would do it again. We had 2 trucks, each one went 20 routes, so the next morning there were 40 bags for me to open up and count the mosquitoes. And I got good at not only counting them, but also, you can't hear that, can you?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Where was I? I was counting mosquitoes, and when it rained, then the bags were wet, and so were the mosquitoes, and they were sticking together. So, not the best experience. This is where I had my first helicopter ride. I got to go up in one of the spray helicopters, and the pilot was trying to scare me. It was one, didn't have sides on it, so you're sitting there with the glass bubble and your seatbelt, and he's diving at the ponds and that kind of thing, and I'm like, I'm not gonna let him know that I'm scared to death here. But we survived that, so that maybe is another example of good fortune, that I didn't fall out of the helicopter. Okay, moving on, in the early 70s, I went on to college. I got much better looking, didn't I? Whoa, that was good. I think this is where I peaked in appearance. I was at Florida Southern College in Lakeland, where I've been and was under the tutelage of Dr. Gilbert for all those years. And we had Vietnam War protests going on. We had a sit-in at our ROTC building. I did not get arrested. We had lots of protest songs going on. We had the first Earth Day following Rachel Carson's producing or writing Silent Spring. We had our first Earth Day on campus. And then there was the water Watergate break-in, and then Richard Nixon resigned. So all of that happened in the 4 years that I was at Florida Southern. A busy time. And I'm still in touch with all of them, and that reunion is March 14th down in Lakeland. So moving on, when you finish college, you either get married, get a job, or go to graduate school. So I went to graduate school. The good people of Ohio offered me a fellowship to come to Ohio State, and you can imagine the gnashing of teeth amongst my family, who were all University of Michigan fans. But they were also appreciative of the fact that it wasn't going to cost them anything for me to go there. So I headed off to Columbus and did a master's degree in genetics, and the thesis topic is called Tissue Culture of Arabidopsis thaliana. Arabidopsis thaliana is this little plant. See? He's in the mustard family, and he's small enough to be able to grow in a test tube, which I will show you in 1 second. I do want to say that this was where I had my first teaching experience. That here I was a TA for people in the biology one, the general biology class, the non-majors class. Only once was I approached to change a grade for a football player to keep him eligible to play. I will not tell you the outcome of that. So here's Arabidopsis growing in a test tube, and that's how I would grow them. So how does this relate to genetics, which is my real passion? Well, I was taking stems, leaves, and roots and separating them into individual cells, and then growing the cells on a petri dish like that. This was new technology in the mid-1970s, and the goal was to see if you could get these little clusters of cells then to turn back into another plant, or turn into another Arabidopsis plant. If you could grow a plant from a leaf cell or from a root cell, and you would do this by manipulating the hormones that the plant was exposed to. Did you know plants have hormones? Just like people do? They do. And so that was a technique that I was working on. And let's see if I can find them. Oh, here they are. Here they are. So this is what my cells would look like when I would take a sample of leaf, for example, which is what this is, and digest it so that the cells would release each other and be individual cells. Plant cells have a cell wall around the outside of them that's sturdy and that causes them to stick together into a whole leaf instead of just a handful of cells, and you can digest them apart from each other with enzymes, and then they'll look like this, and then it would grow into hopefully another plant. Okay, I'm going to go back to what I skipped over, but I wanted to point out to you that at Ohio State we were working on these kind of techniques for 3 different kinds of organisms: animals, plants, and yeast, which is a fungus. Did you know yeast is a fungus? Yes. Yeast is fungus. And it is single cell or unicellular all by itself, so each individual cell is a whole yeast organism, so they have interesting genetics, and the Arabidopsis does, and the animal we were using were the Drosophila fruit flies, of which a whole lot of genetics work has been done dating back to about 1910 that they've been working on it. Anyway, what's common among these 3 species is they have a small number of chromosomes. Humans have 23 pairs, 46 in each cell, And so studying that is a whole lot harder than Arabidopsis, which has 4, and Drosophila, which has 4, and yeast, which has 1. So a lot easier. That's why we're working on these species. Okay, let me go back. Hope you don't get whiplash. Okay. So I was fascinated by genetics and inheritance, and what Mr. Woodard taught me was what was known about genetics at that time, which is that each parent provides 1 copy of something to an offspring, and you could predict the appearance of the offspring looking at the parents. It was all statistics, all problem solving, puzzles. So no wonder it appealed to me. And my life has mirrored the development of what we know about DNA, because it was discovered, no, not discovered, its structure. Right. There's Mendel, and he did all his work with the pea plants and coming up with all these ratios and numbers and things like that. You've probably all seen this before. Yes? No? Okay. But this was going on in the 1850s. And then after that, 100 years later, they figured out that what was causing all of these characteristics, whether it's the color of the pea plant or the height of the pea plant, was in the chemical DNA, which we know is shorthand for deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, and so this was, its structure was discovered and is credited to Watson and Crick, James Watson and Francis Crick. There's another story that I will tell you sometime, maybe when Maurice gives me another opportunity, about some of the women who contributed to the science of DNA, but that you hear nothing about. And so I will tell you about Rosalind Franklin and others who have made major contributions since then, but not today. Okay, so how is this related to genetics? Well, where's the DNA? The DNA is in the cells. So studying and understanding the cells was an important step toward being able to study this and learn more about it. Okay, so I graduated with a master's in genetics, and the husband that I had picked up along the way completed law school and said, "Where would you like to live?" Well, it was the winter of 1978, which had tremendous snowstorms in Ohio and elsewhere, but they closed the school for the first time in 100 years, so it was a lot of snow. So I said, well, I'd like to go back to Florida. What do you think about that? So that's what we did, and he was able to get a job in Orlando, and we relanded, or newly landed, down here. I didn't immediately get a biology job. I was doing something else using the statistics that I had learned as a graduate student when the person I was working for said, "You wouldn't want to teach a night class, would you? Valencia's looking for a biology instructor at night." And I said, well, I could do that. So again, another lucky happenstance. And so at that point I started and continued to teach Biology 1, which is a cell biology class, and environmental science on Valencia's East Campus. And then through Valencia's Open Campus, I taught at night at Mark Marietta and at the Osceola High School. You've never had a challenging experience unless you've tried to describe evolution to the students at Osceola High School. That was a new experience for me. The next semester, I took a different approach. So I did this for 10 years, and then took some time out for some other stuff to happen. During that time, after 6 years of infertility treatment, I have Annie and Chip, and you will see a grown-up picture of them near the end of all of this, but it was my great honor and pleasure to finally have them arrive in my life after much wanting to do that. And during this time period, after they were born, the marriage came to an end. So that happens, but you know, at the time I thought this is the world's worst thing, and then it has turned out to be, yet again, another fortunate thing. So I'm a very fortunate person. Also in the mid-1990s, I had breast cancer, which I survived, as you can see. And I was fortunate to have good treatment, and I took severe treatment because my children were 3 and 5. And I thought, you know, I want to live to see them graduate from high school. Well, they're now in their mid-30s, so I did pretty well. I was very, very lucky, very lucky. Thank you, thank you. I had also been working toward a variety of other activities and achieved a couple of milestones. First of all, you may have heard of a junior league. Anybody know what a junior league is? Right? Usually that brings to mind teacups, big hats. Ladies that don't have anything to do in their spare time, so they get together and have tea parties. Well, this organization is now more than 125 years old, and it has changed over time and does a lot of good community work as it has continued to evolve as the role of women have evolved. And in the 1990s, we were starting to do some more risky things, like go into the homeless shelters and teach the girls who were about to leave and go out into the world some skills like how to balance a checkbook and how to dress for an interview, things like that. We also did some stereotypical things. We helped bring the Orlando Opera to Orlando all those years ago, and we established the Additions School Volunteer Program in Orange County. So a lot of good was going on. I was working my way up through the chairs, so to speak, having been the community research chair and the public affairs chair and those kinds of things, when the opportunity came to be community vice president and then president of the organization. And I talk about this primarily because that's how I got comfortable chairing your meetings. I mean, the membership for the meetings that I was chairing monthly at that point were 600 women, and women like to talk. So learning that skill was important, and also helping the organization move a little bit more toward expanding the role of women and doing different kinds of things. That was my passion. So that led me into politics. And I had the good fortune of serving on the Central Florida Women's Commission on the Status of Women and meeting some interesting people through that and fully embracing Ruth Bader Ginsburg's quote there, "Women belong in all places where decisions are being made." And so I managed the first campaign when Marty Haney ran for Orange County Comptroller, unseated a male incumbent, and she then served for 28 years and is only recently retired. Then that was in 1988, and then 1990, Linda Sutherland ran for Orange County School Board and was elected, served 12 years, including chairman of the school board down there. Please notice two things. First of all, both of these are county-wide races, not regional races. And one's a Republican and one's a Democrat. Didn't matter to me. If we could get women in office, I was supporting that. And so those were fun things to work on and have success. So, the divorce happened. And all of a sudden, I had a pile of money. And so what do you do with a pile of money? Well, prior to the divorce, we had been working with an investment counselor who was often directing us to buy things that I'd never heard of before. And I would get the little, oh, don't worry about it. Well, he served time for the bad advice and embezzlement that he did for us. So I wasn't enamored with trusting a financial counselor. To some extent, but not, here, take my whole pot. Another fortunate event happened in 1997 on Good Morning America. There was a lot of attention being paid to this. These are the Beardstown ladies. They were a group of older women, no, middle-aged women, there we go, in Illinois, and they decided that they could learn how to pick stocks, and so they formed an investment club where they would invest a little bit of money apiece every month, and then they'd study stocks and they'd pick one and they'd buy some shares. Well, the reason that they were on Good Morning America and got this book written about them in 1997 is that in that year, they beat the S&P 500. So that got a lot of attention. So I thought to myself, we can do this. Let me gather up a group of friends and we'll figure out how they did it. And so we did, we formed an investment club, and you will see its name in just a minute. We invested $35 a month, and we studied a piece, and we studied the stocks. Now, in those days, Value Line was the best tool for that. It's a flyer with that analyzes every stock in the S&P every quarter. So every week you got a flyer with, maybe 100 stocks in it, something like that. And little tiny print, hard to read. Wish I'd known Steve Cassetta then. He could have told me what it was I was looking at. But we had this great resource called Better Investing, which is a national education kind of tool. And we would analyze stocks using a ruler and 3 different colors of markers. And it was very primitive then. It became more computer friendly after that, and we continued to analyze it and to invest and purchase stock together. It went for 15 years, and we made some money, we lost some money, but the big one that I can claim as a success is the year or the month that I spotted Green Mountain Coffee. We bought that at the very beginning, and we made lots of money off of Green Mountain Coffee. So we decided a couple of years in that we should go up to Wall Street and take a look at where our money was going. And so we did. We went up to the New York Stock Exchange and had a tour not only of the exchange, but also the basement. Did you know that underground there is gold? Gold that belongs to different countries. It's like in bins, like our bins, or storage bins in the buildings. And so here's a whole bin with a whole stack of gold bars that belong to England. And then here's some that's Canada, and here's some that's Argentina. And the guy said, when one company loans another company money, we just get the forklift and we pick up those ingots and we move them over to the other person's bin. I thought that was amazing. So, while we were there, a couple of us said, let's go down and see if we can get on GMA. Because the Beardstown ladies had been on GMA, and so we thought we could be too. And this was back when they had that whole glass wall and you stood outside and you could see them talking up there. Well, Spencer Christian, remember him? He came out with a microphone and he was looking for interesting people to talk to. You get 15 seconds, on the TV. And he spotted our sign, okay? And he said to me, live TV, he said, did you name your club as some sort of indictment against President Bush's economic policy? So I had to say, no, it's from the Bible. Because the idea for an investment club kind of sprung up from nowhere, just like the burning bush. And so we called it the Burning Bush Investment Club. And there we are. And this young lady right in front there is Mother. She was in the club. So that was a fun time. Then back to Florida. And in 1997, just as I was looking to go back to work, Valencia opened its Osceola campus. At the time I was teaching originally, it had two campuses, east and west, and then that open campus that went various places. This was the fourth campus that they opened, we opened, and there are now 8 campuses of Valencia. It's a big place for people to get primarily 2-year degrees, but they also offer 4-year degrees as well, and it's now called Valencia College, not Valencia Community College anymore. So I was back in the lab there for 22 years. What does that mean? It tells you what order the nitrogen bases are in. You've heard of the A's and T's and G's and C's. Okay, but what order they're in a particular segment determines what protein it'll make to give you a characteristic, like height or eye color or various things like that. So that was finished right about the year 2000. And then another technique has been developed, which is behind all of the CSI that you watch now, when they can take just this little tiny piece of DNA, maybe one hair, because there's cells at the bottom of the hair, and in those cells are the DNA. And this technique is called polymerase chain reaction, and you can take a little tiny piece, and it's like a Xerox machine. It'll make thousands of copies of that, which is how they can then have enough to match it to somebody else's DNA to see if, like that glove that we've been hearing about, matches anybody. Okay, I promised Dale I would not talk about that, so I'm not talking about that. But that's what is behind all this CSI stuff. They say, well, we'll take it to the DNA lab and we'll know right away. Well, that's what they're doing. It's just this little chain reaction. And what's cool about it, I don't want to get detailed about it, but to do this thing, they have to use a heat-tolerant enzyme. And the heat-tolerant enzyme that they use is from a bacteria that they found in the hot springs at Yellowstone National Park. So you never know where you're going to find something that'll be useful. And again, I can do a whole hour on that, which I will not, but some other time. Okay, so where has she been? Well, I like to travel, just like all of you do as well, and I've visited 45 states. I still have 5 left to go. Been to the Grand Canyon 3 times, including rafting on the Colorado, which is wonderful. I've done some national parks. The Acadia National Park in Maine is my very favorite place, and I have been there 8 times with family or friends or by myself, because you don't need anybody to go enjoy these places. And then I proudly tell you that I survived flipping a canoe in a 5-foot waterfall in Arkansas. Lots of experiences. This is kayaking in Alaska. I'm watching the time. Okay. When I went to Alaska the second time, I was on an expedition ship where there were science activities going on, and I got COVID. So I was isolated for 5 days on this 12-day trip. But I had, again, another lucky thing, I had met somebody at dinner a couple days before And she took pictures of absolutely everything she did. So here I was in my little room, my cabin. I could look out the window, but she was out there having fun. But she would send me back immediately. It's like real time. I was seeing pictures of wildlife and scenery and lots of kinds of things. So I'm a very lucky person. Things happen for me. Stick with me. I'm close to wrapping up. Here's some of the international places that I have been. 5 of the Disney ships. Never again. But it was fun. I recommend the Rocky Mountaineer train through the Canadian Rockies. If you ever had the chance to do that, that's a great thing. In slightly younger days, maybe 10 years ago, I hiked the Cape Breton Highlands in Nova Scotia, and that was beautiful also. That was with Road Scholar. If you're familiar with Road Scholar, they do some wonderful trips for 55 and up. I'm not going to say seniors, but for those of us that might not walk quite so fast. And they're also more reasonably priced than some of the others, so I recommend them to you. So here's the next to the last one. Now we're on to VOTG. Okay. Again, a lucky thing. I've talked to people, all of you that have visited several of the facilities and compared this, that, and the other. I drove down Village Place, took one look, and made my decision. I didn't look at anything else. It might have been a bad idea, but that's what I did, and it's been a happy fit for me. The apartment that I'm in over in A was just right, and it was close to being ready to move into. I said to Christina, well, let me go home and see if my house will sell. Sold in a weekend for 3 times what I paid for it, for cash. And so, again, I'm a lucky person, and here I am. I have my wonderful family here, my daughter and my son in the middle, my granddaughter and my son-in-law. They all live within 20 minutes of here. Again, a lucky person. They both went away to school. I did not even whine, and they moved back. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I have found friends here that like to travel, and I've been on adventures now with Sherry and Sarah and Sue G. And those most recent pictures are in our St. Augustine trip. We're headed up to the Florida Caverns in April, and we cruised into the Panama Canal last year. So lots of good things. And over here is see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. And then you gave me a gavel, which is maybe not the best thing. So wrapping up, you've heard about my lucky life. I have been very fortunate, and I hope to continue to be as well. But I'm most fortunate to have met all of you and to have so many friends here. This is a blessing I could not have anticipated. So thank you for your attention. I will entertain questions. Covered it fully, huh?
Well, you can see how fortunate we are to have Sue here and representing us on the resident council. And luckily, she didn't give us that closed book exam because I wouldn't have passed. Anyway, thank you all for coming. But before you leave, I need to go on to one other subject that has risen its head. You may have received today